is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackball. I had a run-in with a former Elections Canada. I guess he was the director, the chief electoral officer of Elections Canada. Jean-Pierre Kingsley. This is him. He looks like me, but melted a little bit with glasses. When he was appointed in 1990 by Brian Mulroney, and that was a couple years before Brian Mulroney left office. Brian Mulroney was trying to reach across the aisle and appoint people that his liberal counterparts would be happy with. And Jean-Pierre Kingsley was the commissioner or the chief electoral officer for Elections Canada from, I believe, 1990 to 2007. I am one of four people in Canada who have been charged and convicted with a regulatory offense that circumnavigates the voter fraud legislation from Elections Canada. I did it for a story for Now Magazine. And Jean-Pierre Kingsley really threw the book at me and decided that he wanted to make an example out of me at the behest of Tony Ianno and his lawyer, who I will name when my guest pops on the show, Jack Siegel. I'll just name him now. It was their urging that made Jean-Pierre Kingsley want to throw the book at me, despite the fact that I did it for a story. And the reason why I bring that up is because you cannot avoid the pitfalls and trappings of partisan appointments in this country, whether it's at the federal level or the provincial level. And a lot of what Jean-Pierre Kingsley did seemed to benefit liberals and go against conservatives. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some cases where the conservatives deserved to have, their wrists slapped for some of their election shenanigans, but sometimes it's quite clear that someone that's supposed to be impartial is sitting and waving pom-poms for a certain team. We are going to talk about the provincial version of that as I welcome my guest. He is the political dark arts specialist himself. His name is David Wallace. David, how are you, buddy?
Not too bad, James. Not too bad. Roaming the Alberta political landscape, consuming all I can consume.
There's a lot to consume there. I'm surprised you don't weigh a lot more because that's quite the consumption. So I let off talking about Jean-Pierre Kingsley, who is the former chief electoral officer of Elections Canada. And, how originally his appointment was seen as an olive branch of sorts to the Liberals, who would take power with Jean Chrétien, I believe 3 years later, or two and a half years later, but turned out to be a thorn in the side of the Conservatives and someone who was largely seen as batting for the Liberals. I don't really have an opinion on whether he batted for the Liberals or not. I know my situation seemed to be in response to strong urgings by Jack Siegel and Tony Ianno, who was the MP for the Trinity Spadina riding, which is where I voted 3 times in the 2004 federal election, and I subsequently was convicted, I believe, in 2006 or 7. And there's a situation in Alberta where Glenn Ressler, who used to be the chief electoral officer of Elections Alberta. Yes. First of all, he just had his case heard in the Supreme Court in October.
He sure did.
I don't think a result has been. I couldn't find a result, so I think they're still deciding on that case. But he was accused of, and this is going back all the way to 2015. Mm-hmm. He was accused of basically putting his thumb on the scale regarding a candidate. His name's Joe MLA. It was the Wild Rose Alliance MLA Joe Anglin, where he was fining his campaign, and these are some of these things that are like technically, I guess you could find them, but he had on his election signs after a certain date that he was the MLA, but because the writ dropped and technically there's no MLAs, he got fined $250. And there was subsequently a few other situations that were sort of seen as really kind of, non-controversial shit that he was getting dinged for.
He really had it in for the Wild Rose and Danielle Smith.
Yeah, so tell me about what your thoughts are on Ressler and what other things that have emerged after your investigation over the last week or so regarding And then again, this what we're trying to show here is an example of a person who's in a position of power that's supposed to be sort of like a beacon of impartiality,
Yes.
looking like they're playing footsie with one of the political parties, or at least being heavy-handed with one of the political parties.
Absolutely. I mean, we have dug fairly deeply into Mr. Glenn Resler. Glenn is a central figure in the corrupt care story. Um, the public wouldn't know that simply because nobody has written about it, or at least Glenn's involvement. You see, because Glenn is one of the people who helps craft the story that hits our media, that is then pumped out as information, legitimate information. But Glenn Resler has been accused of these sort of things before. In fact, any readers of Democracy Watch and a gentleman by the name of, forgive me, James, the
Duff
gentleman's name,
Conacher.
Duff Conacher, who did some outstanding work. He dove very deeply into Glenn Resler, Elections Alberta, Mr. Jason Kenney, and there were so many conflicts. It was, well, it ended up in Supreme Court. Let's put it that way. Yet, again, stunningly, the Globe and Mail, as they did with their almost terminating the blind spot with Athena Bloody Hands Menthalopoulos, failed to inform the public of the very serious allegations that have been leveled and have advanced all the way to Supreme Court against Elections Alberta's own Mr. Glenn Resler. That's what I have a problem with. The obfuscation of information, the paywalling, and that's really apropos with the Globe and Mail, the paywalling of information on some of these characters who have brought forth extraordinary accusations, and extraordinary accusations require an extraordinary deep dive into the source of those accusations.
And it doesn't stop with Wrestler either.
No.
So I believe it was 2023 or 2024. Sorry, I don't recall. I don't have it in front of me. When
It
he
was November 7th of 2023. On that date, the anonymous complaint was launched to Elections Alberta, and our information tells us Carrie Tate, Cam Davies, and Marco von Hugenboss were those anonymous sources that filed the complaint. On that very day, November 7th of 2023, Premier Danielle Smith informed Glenn Resler of Elections Alberta and Marguerite Tressler, the ethics commissioner, who worked hand in hand and enjoys a very productive relationship with Glenn Resler. She informed them both that their contracts would not be renewed.
and who became the interim leader then for Elections Alberta? The
You mean
sorry,
the
the
commissioner?
interim. No, actually, I think it's the chief electoral officer. I believe
Yeah, whatever the
Danielle
hell it's
Smith in
called.
2018 or 2019 abolished the commissioner and replaced it with just the chief electoral officer, if I'm not mistaken.
The lady's name is Paula Hale, former lawyer. She worked at a law firm called Shore Jardine or Jardines. That's where she was immediately before election in Alberta. Glenn Resler brought her in himself.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was the name of the law firm again?
It was called Shore Jardines.
Shore Jardine. So now let's pause on that for a second and then take a look at Carrie Tate's reporting. Much of the bulk of her reporting, when she reports on provincial issues, deal with what she perceives as conflict of interest. Okay, so now she's become allegedly a source for Elections Alberta. She's reporting on what she sees as conflict of interest in the procurement scandal inside Alberta. What is she not reporting regarding Elections Alberta and their new interim leader, Paula Hale?
Well, Paula Hale, for this investigation, hired this law firm, a very big bucks up law firm. And it was called, oh, geez, Shore Jardines. And there was
Oh,
no RFP, there was no bidding process. It was a sole source. And to make it even worse, when Glenn Resler held Paula's role and Paula worked for Glenn, they hired a PI for this whole thing. Yeah. And that PI's name, let's go back here. Where are you? Was named Stuart Cole, former Calgary Police Services officer, current PI. They hired him and they gave him a massive sole source contract, no bidding process. And funnily enough, old Stewie, had just quit his employer to go to work on this massive contract. Can you guess who his employer was?
probably.
Yeah, it's Elections Alberta. Funny that. No shenanigans.
So these are the types of. So there's two things happening here that I can see. One is that There is not. There is an appearance of a lack of impartiality. Let's just put it the very friendly way of at Elections Alberta.
Slightly.
Right now, they have a new chief electoral officer, McClung, right? Gerald McClung?
Is it
No,
Gordon
no, McCure.
McClure? Gordon
Gordon
McClure.
McCure. I'm sorry, McClung. I
Gordon.
don't know
Well,
what
he's
that
not
is.
that new. He's been
Yeah,
around.
he's been around for now about a year and a bit. Um, but he's the one that's overseeing all and green lighting. And now listen, and there's, first of all, I will say that I looked over the eligibility and the rules regarding how you can recall a sitting MLA or provincial elected official in Alberta. It isn't really that difficult. However, the ultimate judgment comes down to the chief electoral officer of Elections Alberta.
Yes.
You have to explain your reason in 100 words or less, which I find really bizarre. You got to get signatures that I believe amount to at least 60 or 70%, whatever it is, of the voter turnout. So you need to be able to like demonstrate that it's something that's wanted. I think the signatures are probably a little bit more important than the reasoning, if I'm gauging it correctly. But there are now 17 recalls, 16 UCP and one NDP
Yeah.
MLA. What do you like? Just to be practical for a moment, like I mean, it is easy, and some people would probably say obvious that there is some rubber stamping going on here in a partisan way. But
Absolutely.
how problematic is the legislation itself, and how easy they make it to be able to recall these politicians?
It's absolutely right for people to take advantage. It's an absolute invitation for fuckery. At the end of the day, we have people with some very strong political leanings who are holding titles and levers of power in our democracy when they are violently opposed to the sitting government simply because they're not of their political stripe. They are cooperating with the very people of our fifth estate, our journalists, who are supposed to safeguard us as well. They are collaborating and conspiring with these people, along with other political actors and unions, to bring down a sitting government. Now, I don't care if you vote out the UCP. I mean, let's be honest. Every other fucking day, there's another hole in the boat. Vote for whoever you like. But the thing about corruption is this: yes, it exists on all sides. That's life. But you have to call it out in your own yard at the same time you're calling it out across the street. Because if you don't, the entire system rots from within and we lose the rule of law. You can't be selective. You got to go after them all, which is part of the reason why I'm so disappointed in Kerry Tate and Nate Pike. They went too far.
Yeah, like we said this on the last podcast about how it's clear to me, anyways, that it isn't about they'll get into bed with anybody as long as that person is anti Danielle Smith, right?
It seems so.
And it's a betrayal to their principles if they ever had any. I'm of the opinion that Nate Pike has no idea what a principle is. I think he's a charlatan and a fraud and a hack. But Carrie Tate should be at least familiar with the concept of principles. But a lot of when your ambition gets in the way of your ability to truth tell, to be able to be balanced and to be able to explain to your readers a full scope observation of whatever the story is that you're working on, then you're damaged goods. I believe after that, if you can report on a procurement scandal and your allegations of conflict of interest, great, that's fine. If you can't do it to the organization that you're providing source material for in the form of anonymous tips, allegedly, then you're not doing your job. Then you're clearly either working for yourself or for a political party or against a political party.
Absolutely, clearly. Look, James, right now the Globe and Mail is preparing a story on me. They're going to accuse me of the most awful, heinous crimes. They're going to underline that my questionable lack of ethics and character, how I am, in fact, a criminal, and that I am an ex convict, and that I am a con man or a shyster or a political hitman, and that I have worked and done horrible jobs for different governments all around the world. And they're going to put down source material gathered from Canada Land and CBC. And it's all true. In fact, I'm much worse,
Sorry.
which
I
makes
love that, but it's my favorite thing. It's so disarming, right?
well, it's
Like
true. And here's the thing. In my entire career as a rat fucker, I have never been hired by an innocent party. Every client I ever had was as guilty as sin, just the way I like them. And it was as easy as one, two, three to achieve the agendas that were set out by these customers because corruption usually triumphs. Never in my career have I ever been presented with an opportunity to represent an innocent party that has been so demonized and maligned and drugged through the fucking gutter and made out to look like the worst criminal scum on earth. Never have I ever been given that opportunity. And I cannot tell you how hard it has been to have the media listen to the truth. That's because the media isn't in the business of telling the truth, they're in the business of keeping the cash flowing in. And how do you do that? Friendly unions, friendly political parties. We live in a shithole, an absolute sewer. And don't think that political corruption is only consigned to the other side of the aisle.
oh no, it's rampant all around. I used to think that the NDP were too stupid to be corrupt, but I just realized that their corruption is is more or less silly and a little less like if they were truly like listen, they got a lot of problems. Most of their problems are ideological, but they're always in debt. Like if you're good at being corrupt, do you know what I mean? You probably wouldn't be in debt. I'm talking about the federal NDP. I don't know what's going on with the provincial NDP. Um, I noticed that you had another a couple of comments on your show earlier tonight regarding Beauty and the Beast. Or here's Beauty and the Beast. This is Beauty, and this is Beast. They're husband and wife.
A shit!
Yeah, and what's going so the letter to Telus to the Telus executives and I pointed out to you on the phone the other day that there's a lot of really I don't want to get into the specifics right now but there's a lot of really interesting characters on the board of directors at
Really interesting.
Telus,
Really
yeah, that
interesting.
would probably be very much interested in some of the allegations regarding funding of small businesses and investments
Uh-huh.
into businesses that are represented by a husband of the vice president of TELUS. That's to me. Imagine it wasn't a breaking of the rule though. This is where I find the corporate world really strange and exotic sometimes because who knows how? Because I mean, if it was the financial services world, everything would be fine. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? But here we are with one of the biggest telecommunications companies in Canada, and a person's hubby is getting rich off of their connections, their wife's connections to TELUS, and I've been trying my best to look for internal documents to explain what the rules are for conflict of interest in that arena.
Good
I
luck.
can't seem to find anything. And it would be quite interesting if we found out that there was no rules being broken, but I have a feeling that's not the case.
I need to apologize to a shit and his beautiful bride, Zanul. I implied
I need to
that.
apologize to a shit.
You
That
know,
is
there you go.
hilarious.
And Telus. I need to
Yeah,
apologize to them because I implied strongly that Telus is paying for the little African vacation to Morocco and Casablanca for a shit
right.
and his wife, when in fact it could easily be from one of the many charities that is shit created to rip off kids with cancer and things of that nature. He's embezzling those fuckers too, and we can prove it. And we're coming for you, shit. We're coming. We're coming. And don't get up to any shenanigans in those foreign countries. Don't be like Jason Kenney and other Canadian politicians, going to those freak parties and doing shit that gets caught on tape. Make Stephen Harper fire your ass.
Yeah, is Tel Aviv's a hell of a city.
Sure is.
David Wallace. We'll be covering a lot more of this soon. I'm assuming, but thanks again for joining us today on Black Belt. Appreciate it, buddy.
Tally ho.
Alberta's a funny place. 17 recall by elections are now being scheduled. It's going to cost, I believe, McClure said it was going to cost $9 million, and he's asking the government right now for $3 million. And it'll be really interesting to see how Danielle Smith responds to this. She's already on record saying that she probably wants to at least revisit the recall legislation. But now that it's going to cost the government close to $10 million to actually execute these by elections, I'm curious to see what her next maneuver might be. Um, but until then,